Circling back to the top story, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff says Donald Trump was able to win a concession from Vladimir Putin that Washington could offer a NATO-style security guarantee to Ukraine.
Mr. Witkoff, however, didn't provide details of how a collective defense arrangement would work. And the revelation comes ahead of the White House meeting between the U.S. and Ukrainian presidents, where they will be joined by a host of European leaders who are expected to push back against ceding Ukrainian territory as part of a peace deal.
For more, let's speak now to Dr. Peter Layton. He's visiting fellow at the Griffith Asia Institute at Griffith University. Dr. Layton, thank you very much for joining us on the show. I want to start by asking you for your reading of where we are right now, because 48 hours ago, the sense was that Putin got everything he wanted. Donald Trump maybe came away with a win or two, and Ukraine drew the short end of the stick. I mean, is that still true now that we've had a bit of time to look at what happened in Alaska?
I think that you're right. I mean, at the present time, no one's too sure what President Putin actually signed up for, if you like. President Putin's speech in i.e. Alaska didn't actually set out anything. So we have all these secondhand reports from President Trump. Now there is some, this good news about a security guarantee that might happen. The trouble with this is it does rely an awful lot upon whether Putin actually made that concession in the first case. It also relies mostly upon President Trump actually implementing that. Words are fine, but we have to see actions yet.
In terms of that, the security assurance, Dr. Trump's envoy says Putin has agreed to Ukraine receiving NATO-style security guarantees, and he's calling this a game changer. But why would Moscow accept this framework yet still oppose Ukraine joining NATO? What's the difference, and just how credible or practical would these guarantees be in reality for Ukraine?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Obviously, NATO has the credibility of the treaty's 80-year life. Now, the guarantees themselves on the actual written ones are relatively vague. Even Article 5, it says that if there is an armed attack, nations will take actions, but it doesn't specify what actions. So the actions could be simply just some consultations, some talk, selling them arms, etc. So guarantees like that, on the face of it, will not be sufficient for the Ukrainians. They will certainly be seeking some troops on the ground, some smaller sort of tripwire force on the border of the major European nations, and preferably the Americans as well.
Dr. Layton, here's what we seem to know, and I stress the word seem to know. Putin apparently wants the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in Ukraine. Trump reportedly plans to urge Zelensky to surrender the Donbass as part of peace negotiations. Now, I'm wondering right now, is this still a red line for Kyiv? Vladimir Zelensky has consistently said so, but I'm wondering whether a war where Ukraine could now be more open to an exchange of this nature, land for life?
Yes, it's certainly an interesting observation. On President Trump's talking about a land swap, but in fact, it is Ukraine giving Russia land and nothing coming back in return. But there is the business about the Ukrainian people are certainly tired of this war, having suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties. I think there is certainly a possibility of if you say a peaceful land swap like that. But the Ukrainians will have to be convinced that this is not just a ceasefire, if you like, that this is long-term peace. You have to bear in mind that the rest of Europe is convinced that the Russians simply want to a short-term stopping of the war so they can rebuild their forces. And they're forecasting a possible Russian invasion of the Baltic states around 2028, 2029. So there'll have to be some real guarantees there that the Ukrainian war ends rather than is just a temporary pause.
Dr. Layton, very quickly on that particular point, why is the Donbass so important from a strategic and economic perspective, very quickly?
Oh, there's a reasonable number of Ukrainian people live there. Also, some major cities, and importantly, some important minerals as well. Including some of those critical minerals. The Ukraine, of course, signed an agreement with President Trump about mining some of those.
Mr. Zelensky won't be arriving in Washington alone. We know that the EU leaders have promised to present a united front with Ukraine. But realistically, do they have enough influence to pressure Mr. Trump not to strike a deal seen as unfavorable to Ukraine?
So that's perhaps the second part of President Putin's ploy. He's obviously very keen about splitting the United States from Europe and splitting up NATO. So this particular meeting will have importance to see whether NATO can stand as one, bearing in mind that, of course, President Trump and the United States is the major nation in the NATO alliance. So President Trump appears to be influenced by the person he is talking to, and President Putin was obviously very influential as far as discussing Russia's needs, let's say. So it's quite possible that nothing will in fact come out of this meeting except exactly the same. The Ukrainians will very likely push back, and President Trump won't perhaps be that strong or that aggressive when there's several other European leaders in the room.
I'm wondering, Dr. Layton, how you think President Trump will react to so many European leaders in the room. I mean, some are saying it's no accident that Keir Starmer, Mark Rutte and Alexander Stubbs are showing up because, these are people, Meloni as well, I should add, these are people, that Trump gets along well with.
Yes, they are. President Trump, of course, wants to hand over the European security to the Europeans, if you like, and this is certainly an opportunity for that. He could literally wash his hands of this entire thing and say, "Well, I have done my best. I have set up I have set the ground for a possible ending of the war, but the Europeans and the Ukraine will not come on board." It's sort of almost like Gaza, sort of come up with a Gaza plan. Everybody was perhaps not attracted to that, and so President Trump walked back. So this could be the case of President Trump simply wanting to isolate himself further from the Europeans.
Dr. Layton, we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much for explaining things to us. Dr. Peter Layton is visiting fellow at the Griffith Asia Institute.